Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, we're talking about personally one of my favorite fighters of all time, Alexander Volkanovski, and the possibility of Volka facing Diego Lopes for an interim title, UFC 312 in Australia. We're going to talk about the possibility of this happening and what could prevent this from happening. Before getting started, make sure to like, subscribe, click that notification so we can get our community to 1,000 subscribers ASAP. Alexander Volkanovski is not shying away from the biggest fights in his division. He is open to facing anyone, in all honesty, especially in that 145 division. Well, let's say the top 5 guys, especially guys that are on the up and up, like Diego Lopes, obviously. This goes to show that Alexander Volkanovski is truly a fighter, all meaning of the word. He could have just waited around and said he wants a title shot after, UFC 308, but obviously that is not the case. He's taken the biggest fight that there is really in that 145 division. Diego Lopes and Bruno Silva are two of the toughest, baddest fighters, not only in that division, but the whole roster. Another name, I do digress a bit, that's being slept on is that Bruno Silva. Keep an eye on Bruno Silva, everyone. This guy has true potential. I believe the sky's the limit with Bruno Silva. As I said, I do digress a bit. We're talking about Diego Lopes, which, in all honesty, his record speaks for itself. And the last performance against Brian Ortega was a clear indicator of where Diego Lopes is at in terms of form. The guy is on an upward trajectory taking him straight to a title, and it just happens that Alexander Volkanovski is what's standing between Diego Lopes and a title shot, right? Obviously, this is a great way for Alexander Volkanovski to test himself against uprising talent. He did once against Ilia Topuria. Shout out to Volkanovski. Obviously, that fight was inevitable. Loses his title. Now he tests himself against arguably the best fighter in that division, aside from the champion, obviously. All respect to Max Holloway. Volka defeated Max numerous times. Everyone knows about that. But when we're talking about Diego Lopes, the guy's just blowing his competition out of the water. Nobody really could stand toe-to-toe with Diego Lopes and give him a real run for his money thus far. At least as far as the last 3 performances are involved. So Alexander Volkanovski, if this fight does happen, and it will happen under one condition. Obviously, everyone knows that Diego Lopes is serving as a backup fighter for that UFC 308. Now, I've said this numerous times before. We talked about it collectively on this channel. Unless 2 fighters are inside of the octagon and the octagon door closes and the referee calls time for starting the fight, that is, then I don't believe it. It's just me. We all know that weird things happen, and there's a whole term that's been recently created. That's the Dan Ige. It's 4 hours before a main event. Obviously, Dan Ige steps in to fill in, I believe, for Brian Ortega during that time, if I'm not mistaken, against Diego Lopes, ironically. And Diego Lopes could actually see himself in there against either Max Holloway or Alexander Volkanovski. I don't see how Max Holloway fighting Diego Lopes makes any sense. I don't see Max shying away from this, but it's just not a smart idea, I don't think. That being said, if God forbid something happens to Max Holloway to where he's unable to make the fight UFC 308, then Diego Lopes is going to find himself in there against Ilia Topuria, champion of the division, to challenge for that title, UFC 308, which is right around the corner. So that kind of puts the plans for UFC 312 for Volkanovski on hold, at least temporarily. But obviously, if everything goes to plan, UFC 308, then the idea of Volka versus Diego Lopes is absolutely mind-blowing. Fantastic fight. If it was to happen, I would most certainly be tuned in. If you made it this far, truly appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and subscribe for more.